My sister didn't know I was using her old phone. That's when I found my family's secret group chat calling me a failed investment. I confronted them, and my uncle smirked. You cost us $60,000 in therapy bills, and for what? My sister whispered, you're weak. You deserve to be lied to. But I had proof and a plan. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to walk away from family. Not because I believe in unconditional love or any of that sentimental crap, but because for most of my life, I thought family was the one thing you could always count on. Even when things got bad, even when people said things they didn't mean, family was supposed to be there. Turns out, that was just another lie I told myself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Damien. I'm 33, single, and I live in Chicago. Nothing glamorous. I rent a one-bedroom apartment in a building that's older than I am. I work in digital marketing, and my social life consists of a few close friends I see when our schedules align. I'm not rich, I'm not particularly successful, and I don't have a picture-perfect life. And according to my family, that makes me a failure. I didn't realize how deep their disappointment ran until I found their secret group chat. That was the night everything changed. The phone that wasn't really wiped, it started with Lillian, my older sister. She'd gotten a new phone and casually mentioned that I could use her old one if I wanted. Mine was a piece of junk cracked screen, dying battery, barely holding on, so I said sure. She handed it over with a smirk. It's wiped clean. Just reset it and set it up as new. I should have been suspicious then, but I wasn't. I took it home, plugged it in, and started setting it up. Logged into my accounts, installed my apps, the usual. And then, right in the middle of downloading Spotify, a notification popped up. Dad, he's never going to find out. Don't overthink it. I frowned. Who was he? Find out what? I swiped down and saw it was from a group chat named Investment Discussion. That was weird. My family wasn't in business together, and I sure as heck wasn't involved in any investments. I hesitated, then tapped it, and that's when my stomach dropped. A failed investment, the messages went back years. It wasn't a business chat. It wasn't about stocks or real estate. It was about me. Mom, he's 33. He should have his life together by now. Uncle Richard, we gave him every opportunity, but he still turned out mediocre. Dad, I told you therapy wouldn't change anything. That was $60,000 down the drain. Lillian, he's weak. You should have never told him the truth. He deserved to be lied to. What the heck? My fingers shook as I scrolled further back. Aunt Meredith, we've spent enough on him. If he can't function like a normal person by now, that's not our problem. Uncle Richard, we backed the wrong horse. Some investments don't pay off. Dad, exactly. We're done coddling him. He needs to stop embarrassing us. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. They weren't just venting. They weren't just frustrated parents. They were talking about me like I was a failed business venture. Like I was something they'd poured money into and now regretted. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? They had been pretending to care. Pretending to support me while behind my back, they were tallying up their losses. All the time, they encouraged me to get help. All the times they reassured me that it was okay to take my time to figure things out. It had all been a lie, because in reality, I was just a bad investment. The dinner confrontation, I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying every moment of my life, every interaction, every conversation with them, wondering how I'd been so blind. But one thing became crystal clear. I couldn't let this go. They thought I was weak, that I'd roll over and accept this. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. That Saturday, I showed up for dinner at my parents' house, just like I always did. They were all there: Mom, Dad, Lillian, Uncle Richard, Aunt Meredith. Laughing, drinking wine, acting like everything was fine. I played along, waited. Then, right in the middle of dinner, I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. You forgot to wipe the chat, Lillian. Silence. Lillian blinked, then let out a short laugh. What? Your old phone. I tapped the screen, opening the screenshots. I saw the group chat. Mom gasped. Dad sighed and set his glass down. Uncle Richard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Lillian? She just smirked. Well, guess you found out. I gripped the edge of the table. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Damien? She tilted her head. You are a failed investment. You're in your 30s, and you still don't have your life together. I turned to Dad. You spent 60 grand on therapy, and that's your biggest regret? Not that your son was struggling, not that he needed help, just that it didn't pay off. Dad exhaled through his nose. We did what we could for you. We can't keep throwing money at something that isn't working. Something, not someone, I whispered. Mom looked like she wanted to say something, but Uncle Richard cut in first. Look, Damien, we had to make a decision. The family can't carry dead weight forever. Dead weight. I swallowed the lump in my throat. So that's what I am to you. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. Dead weight? Don't be so dramatic, Lillian scoffed. You're acting like we were plotting against you. We were just being honest. You'll never be on our level. And that's fine, but stop expecting us to pretend like you are. My head was spinning. I wanted to scream, cry, throw something, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Because I had a plan. I sat there, my fingers curled in a fist beneath the table. my nails digging into my palms so hard I was sure they'd leave marks. My heart was pounding, but I refused to let them see me break. Not now. Not when I finally saw them for who they really were. I forced myself to take a deep breath, letting the silence stretch between us. I wanted them to feel it, to squirm in it, but they didn't. Lillian just smirked. Sipping her wine like this was all just a minor inconvenience. Dad looked annoyed, like I was wasting his time. Mom looked guilty, but not enough to actually say anything. Uncle Richard and Aunt Meredith, they looked like they had already checked out of the conversation. I felt sick. So that's it, I finally said. My voice was eerily calm, which surprised even me. You all sat there for years, pretending to support me, pretending to care, and now that I know the truth, you're not even trying to deny it? What's there to deny? Uncle Richard said, shrugging. You found the chat. You saw what we said. We don't think you're a bad person, Damien, just... He trailed off, waving a hand vaguely in the air. Just what? I snapped. Just disappointing, Dad finished, not even looking up from his plate. I could feel the heat rising in my face. Disappointing. I let the words sit in my mouth, like something rotten I wanted to spit out. Come on, Damien, Lillian sighed, rolling her eyes. Stop acting like you're some kind of victim. You're not homeless. You're not struggling to survive. You just didn't meet the expectations we had for you. That's life. People get disappointed. Move on. Move on. Like it was that simple. Like she hadn't just confirmed what I had suspected my entire life, that I would never, ever be enough for them. I clenched my jaw. What truth were you talking about? I asked, my eyes locking onto hers. Lillian raised a brow. What? In the chat. You said I deserved to be lied to. What truth were you talking about? For the first time that night, she hesitated. Dad shot her a look. Lillian, what is the truth? I repeated, my voice harder now. Lillian exhaled, setting her wine glass down with a deliberate clink. Jesus, Damien, do you really want to do this right now? I'm sitting right here and you've already said I'm a failed investment, a disappointment, and dead weight. Might as well go all in, right? No one spoke. Mom looked down at her lap. Dad sighed, rubbing his temple like he had a headache. Lillian leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Fine. You want to know the truth? Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You were never supposed to be here. The room tilted. What? I breathed. You were an accident, Damien, she said, her voice light and casual, like we were discussing the weather. Mom and Dad never planned for a second kid. They had me, and that was it. Then Mom got pregnant with you, and by the time they even considered other options, it was too late. So they had you, and they tried to make the best of it. She tilted her head. But let's be honest, you were never what they wanted. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a dull thud 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 drowning out everything else. I turned to my parents, hoping, praying that one of them would deny it. That Mom would look at me with tears in her eyes and tell me Lillian was lying. That Dad would at least have the decency to look ashamed. But they didn't. Mom was staring at the table, her lips pressed together, fingers gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles were white. Dad just sighed. It doesn't change anything. I almost laughed. Doesn't it change anything? I shook my head, stunned. I wasn't even wanted, and you all had the audacity to treat me like an investment that didn't pay off? It's not that simple, Damien, Mom said quietly. No. I let out a bitter chuckle. Then explain it to me. Explain how it's not that simple. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds pretty simple. No one answered. Because there was nothing to say. Because I was right. Because they knew I was right. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. My hands were still shaking, but I didn't care if they noticed anymore. Lillian, of course, was unfazed. She just shrugged. Look, Damien, you can be mad all you want, but at the end of the day, this is the truth. And you can either accept it and move on, or you can keep throwing a tantrum. But we're not going to coddle you anymore. Coddle me. Like I was some spoiled brat throwing a fit over not getting the right color car for my birthday. I looked around the table, at each and every one of them, and felt something inside me go cold. They didn't care. Not really. Maybe they never had. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't desperate to make them care. I was just done. I picked up my phone and stood up. Where are you going? Dad asked, frowning. Home, I said simply. Mom looked up, her face etched with concern. Damien, let's not end the night like this. Like what, Mom? I cut her off. Like me finally seeing you all for who you really are? She flinched. Uncle Richard rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. I ignored him. You want to talk about investments? I said, looking at Dad. Fine. Here's my final report. You all were an investment. And I'm cutting my losses. Lillian let out a short laugh. You say that now, but where are you going to go? You don't have anyone else, Damien. Like it or not, we're still your family. I stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. Not anymore. And then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't storm off in a dramatic fit of rage. I just left. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something. I didn't need them. And I sure as heck didn't want them. I walked out into the cold Chicago night, the wind biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The weight of what had just happened was pressing down on me like an avalanche. But underneath all that shock and anger, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't bending over backwards, hoping for scraps of affection. I was done. But being done didn't mean I was just going to disappear quietly. No, I wanted them to feel what they had done. I wanted them to pay for treating me like a disposable asset. They thought I was a failed investment. Fine. Then it was time for them to experience some real losses. The first step. Information is power. I spent the next week in a haze, but not the kind they were expecting. They probably thought I was wallowing, feeling sorry for myself, replaying their words over and over in my head. And maybe a part of me was. But mostly, I was planning. Because there was something they had all conveniently forgotten. I might have been the family disappointment, the one who didn't measure up, but there was one thing: I had always been good at gathering information. They underestimated me. And that was their first mistake. The second mistake? Thinking I was weak. I started with the apartment. My grandfather, the only member of my family who had actually given a damn about me, had left me a small apartment in his will. At the time, I was too young to handle property, so my parents had managed it for me. I hadn't questioned it, because I had trusted them. Idiot. I logged into my email, dug through old documents, and pulled up everything related to that property. And just as I suspected, my family had been renting it out for years, collecting the money, and never giving me a cent. Legally, the apartment was still in my name, which meant that money should have been mine, which meant they had been stealing from me. I could feel the rage bubbling up, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to let anger make me sloppy. Instead, I made an appointment with a real estate agent. I told them I wanted to sell immediately. No discussions, no family approval. By the time my parents realized what was happening, it would already be gone. The second step. Their secrets weren't safe. Once I started digging, I couldn't stop. I went through old emails, financial records, anything I had access to. And that's when I found it. A loan. A loan my parents had taken out in my name when I was younger. A loan that had been paid off using the rent money from my apartment. I had never seen a dime of that money. I had been working myself off for years, barely making ends meet, while they had been funneling cash into covering their own debts using my name to do it. I wanted to confront them immediately, but I knew better. Patience. I needed to do this right. So instead, I called a lawyer. Because if they thought I was going to let them walk away from this without consequences, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The third step. The iceberg beneath the surface. With every passing day, I learned more about how deep their betrayals ran. It wasn't just the apartment. It wasn't just the loan. It was everything. The little gifts they had given me over the years. Not out of kindness, but to manipulate me. The times they had pushed me towards certain jobs. Not because they cared, but because they thought it would raise my value. And Lillian? Oh, Lillian was the worst of them all. I found out she had used my name to secure a personal loan when she was in college. She had paid it off years ago, but the fact that she had done it at all, unforgivable. I sat in my apartment, my phone in my hands, my fingers hovering over the call button. Should I call them? Should I tell them what I know? No, I wasn't going to warn them. I was going to show them. The calm before the storm. I stayed quiet. I didn't text them, didn't call. At first, I thought maybe they'd reach out. Maybe they'd try to do damage control, but nothing. No one cared. It stung, but it only fueled me more. Because if I wasn't worth their time, then they sure as heck weren't worth my mercy. And when I made my next move, they were going to feel it. I didn't give them a warning. I wanted them blindsided. The first domino fell with the apartment sale. I got an offer within days, cash, no complications. It was below market value, but I didn't care. The goal wasn't maximizing profit. It was control. The papers were signed, the deal was closed, and within a week, my parents received a formal letter stating that their management of the property was over. Effective immediately, all rental agreements were null and void, which meant the tenants, the ones they had been secretly collecting rent from, were getting kicked out. And guess who those tenants were? My Uncle Richard's business partner. I had no idea. When I dug into it, I realized that Uncle Richard had made a deal years ago. He rented the apartment to a guy he worked with, letting him pay under the table at a reduced rate. A favor to strengthen their business relationship. Now, that guy was out on the street, and he was pissed. Which meant Uncle Richard was in deep. It was a beautiful thing, really. One moment, my family was coasting along, thinking they had everything under control. The next, the foundation started cracking beneath them. But this was just step one. The second shockwave, the lawsuit. Once the apartment was out of my hands, I turned my attention to the loan fraud. I had two options: go through the police, go through a civil lawsuit. I chose the second option. Not because I was letting them off easy, but because a lawsuit would be louder, more public. See, if I had gone to the police, they could have found a way to settle it quietly. Maybe even convince me to drop the charges. But a lawsuit? That would put them in court. That would put their financial crimes on record. And that was something they couldn't sweep under the rug. The moment my lawyer filed the paperwork, I knew it was only a matter of time before the explosion. The third shockwave, Lillian's life unraveling. While I was waiting for the legal process to move forward, I focused on Lillian. My sister, the golden child. The one who had smirked at me across the dinner table and called me a failed investment. She thought she was untouchable. I wanted to prove her wrong. It didn't take long to find her weak spot for her job. Lillian worked for a prestigious financial firm in downtown Chicago. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, building a reputation for herself. And what was the one thing that financial firms hated? Fraud. I had proof that she had taken out a loan in my name without my knowledge. The statute of limitations had expired, meaning she couldn't be criminally charged for it, but that didn't mean her company wouldn't care. I compiled the evidence, bank statements, emails, everything. Then I wrote an anonymous letter and mailed it directly to her employer's compliance department. I wasn't sure what would happen. Maybe they'd brush it off. Maybe they'd slap her on the wrist. Or maybe they'd see her as a liability, a risk, an embarrassment, the same way she had seen me. The fallout begins. I didn't have to wait long for the first call. Dad. His number flashed across my screen 2 days after the lawsuit was filed. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, Mom called. Ignored. Then Uncle Richard. Ignored. Lillian didn't call, but she sent a single text. You have no idea what you just did. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Oh, I know exactly what I did. And then I blocked her. I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. They had made their move. Now was my turn, and I wasn't finished yet. For a few days, all I did was wait. I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't know when. Then, on a cold Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang again. Mom. This time, I answered. Damien, what the heck is going on? Her voice was strained, bordering on hysteria. You're suing us? You're selling the apartment? What are you doing? I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her nervous. Then, calmly, I said, get my money back. Damien, be reasonable. We're family? I repeated, letting out a short, humorless laugh. Are you sure about that? Because I don't remember family treating each other like a goddamn business deal. It wasn't like that, she pleaded. We had to make certain choices for the family. No, I cut her off. You made choices for yourselves, and now you're facing the consequences. Mom went quiet, and then, just barely above a whisper, she said, you're really going through with this? Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I am. Then I hung up, and that's when the real fallout began. The lawsuit hits hard. A week later, my parents were officially served. The moment they realized I wasn't bluffing, the panic set in. Dad tried calling me. No answer. Lillian sent me another text. You're ruining everything. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded all communication attempts to my lawyer. The lawsuit was simple. They took out a loan in my name. They used my property's rent money to pay it off. They never gave me a dime. All of it was documented. They couldn't deny it. So they tried the next best thing, damage control. They offered to settle quietly. They'd pay me back, but only if I dropped the lawsuit. I refused. I didn't just want the money. I wanted it on record. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they did, the way I had carried it for years without even knowing. The case dragged out for months, but in the end, I won. They were forced to pay me back every cent. The best part? It was public record now, which meant anyone who ran a financial background check on them would see it. That alone destroyed my father's reputation in his social circles. Lillian's downfall, the fallout for Lillian hit even harder. 3 months after I sent the anonymous letter to her company, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. You got me fired, you miserable piece of trash. I smiled. Apparently, her employer did care about fraud. I didn't respond, but I did look her up on LinkedIn a few days later. Her job title was gone, and her profile? Seeking new opportunities. Guess she wasn't so untouchable after all. Uncle Richard's financial ruin, the lawsuit and apartment sale, had a ripple effect. When my uncle's business partner lost his rental, he turned on Richard. Apparently, they'd been working on a big deal that required the guy's financial stability. Losing his housing messed that up, which screwed up their contract. A month later, Richard's business suffered a huge loss. And suddenly, the man who called me dead weight was the one sinking. The final confrontation one night, months after everything had unraveled, I got a text from my father. We need to talk. I ignored it. The next day, he showed up at my apartment. I wasn't surprised. I let him in, mostly because I wanted to see how much this had broken him. And it had. The man standing in my living room wasn't the confident, smug father I had grown up with. He looked tired, defeated. Are you happy? He asked, his voice rough. I raised an eyebrow. Should I be? You took everything from us. I let out a short laugh. No, I just took back what was mine. He sighed, rubbing his face. Damien, we hesitated. We never meant for things to end up like this. You mean you never expected me to fight back? He didn't deny it. Instead, he did something I never thought I'd see. He apologized. A real apology. Not the forced, dismissive kind. Not that I'm sorry you feel that way. A real, genuine apology. It should have meant something, but it didn't. Not anymore. I'm sorry too, I said. Sorry that you only care now that you've lost. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't, because we both knew the truth. I was never the failure. They were. And as he walked out of my apartment for the last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. They'd spent their lives treating me like an investment that didn't pay off. But in the end, I was the one who walked away richer. And that was a return on investment I could live with.